Skena Swagwego Nagasa Hyant was. Hello, everybody. My name's Gary Farmer. I've done a lot in my career. I'm certainly an actor the whole time, right, since I was 20 years old, and had a great experience finding acting. I know I wanted to help my community some way. I thought maybe doing social work or being a cop or working in the prison system was some way to help, but I realized, I just get caught up and be a spoke in the wheel, and change is really, small in those regions. And it's when I had picked up an interest in photography when I was in high school, and after a couple of years of police school, the Attica prison riots back in the 70s must have been 72. I just changed my course and returned to the arts and thought. And then when I discovered acting, maybe a year or two later, I just never turned back because I thought, oh, this is I can help make change here. And I was in Canada at the time. They were very much a theatrical based Native community, acting community in Toronto. Both, influenced a lot by the British and the Irish and the French, of course. And acting, I just took to it, and I got so much support as a young theater actor from my overall Toronto-based arts community that it just inspired me to keep working at it, and it's really turned out. But I forgot what the first part of the question was now. But um,
Uh,
anyway,
I think if we want to get really spiritual with it,
oh, I'm from Six Nations along the
yeah,
Grand River,
yeah.
which is a Haudenosaunee or Iroquois community set up just about maybe 60 miles from the border. So I pretty well grew up in Buffalo and Niagara Falls, New York, along the Irish, Italian, and Polish communities of the day. And it was a really interesting experience for me. I don't know if you saw that film, Dead Man.
Yeah.
He
Oh, yeah.
gets plucked from his community and tossed into this kind of, white world. And I felt that's how I related to that film so well, because I felt like even though my community is only 60 miles away, and I had a great relationship, all four of my grandparents are from there, and so my parents were part of a social network of Haudenosaunee and Native people in those Niagara Falls and Buffalo, and it taught me the political side of being indigenous and a border Indian, but it never necessarily gave me the cultural aspect, the ceremonial aspect. Our longhouse culture is very strong in my home community. I get back there at least 4 or 5 times a year. I got a sister still alive with children, and it's been a blessing because I kind of had to relearn my culture in my teenage and adulthood. And it's been I studied my language for about 6 months, adult immersion, full time, and it really helped me. And I saw that filmmaker from the film that Lily's just about to release. It's called oh my God, I can't think of the name of it now, but the director is a Cayuga from because the Cayugas and Senecas Six Nations had control of that whole Mississippi region all the way down into Oklahoma, and there's
Mhm.
Senecas Cayugas down there. And that young filmmaker lady came to my community and studied my language, which was Cayuga, for 3 intense years, adult immersion. And she put that language into this film, and I'm so proud of her because it's almost used like they used Navajo in the war times, where the people couldn't understand what they were saying to each other. But it was a really critical conversation. It's really a murdered and missing Indigenous women story. I can't. I did my short-term memories are getting smaller, but it's a great film, and it's just being released. I'm pretty sure on Amazon. Uh,
Oh, is it it's not Erica's film, is it?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I spoke to her last year.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, she must have
Yeah.
told you that story, and
Yeah, it
she
took
got
me
the
a
crew to
second.
even talk our language instead of cut and action, and they
Yeah.
translated those film terms into Cayuga. and she was telling me was that the film crew kept up with those in other productions, using Cayuga language for a lot of the film terminology we use for making movies.
Oh, that's I don't she didn't tell me about that part. I think she was being humble.
Yeah, no,
She
she's a blessing, and I
yeah,
expect so much from her in the future. And of course, Lily's support of that film and Erica
yeah,
has really launched Erica's career. It's like she's with one of the biggest Hollywood agents there is now, CCA, I think, and
yeah.
I just expect so many more films in her career, long career to come.
Yeah, I hope so. Especially now, I think we need more of those artists. And you brought up, being like thrust into a primarily white and Caucasian community when you were younger. I want to know what kind of impact that had on you before you studied your culture again and re-immersed yourself. What kind of experience was that like initially, especially at that age? That could be really tough.
Well, right from when I was a child, we have this J Treaty rights, which
Mm,
as a Canadian native, it allows me to live, work, and retire in the United States. It's the best treaty we ever got. And all the border Indians in Canada, any status, card carrying native can do just like I've done. I started my career in Canada in both film and TV, as well as, I was a theatrical actor for 10 years before I did any film or TV. But those rights politically, fighting from it's a treaty from 1794. So I've been
oh, wow.
educating border guards my whole life about that treaty, and I still just come to the States with my Indian card and been living here for years. But I grew up in that Polish, Italian, Irish community. I was a big part of the gang life. There was a big
Mm,
gang situation going on back then. And I thought about that for years. Why are we all ganged up? Because my gang was, originally the Magnificent Bastards, which turned into kind of the Beta Tau, which they started using those acronyms, the Greek, language or
oh yeah.
alphabet. It was Alpha Tau, Phi Beta, and they were all, there was Beta, and there was Beta of Canada. They had this big monster gang. I'll never forget living there with them. One of the bigger frats, Phi Beta. One of the guys had one of those amphibians they used in World War II, and they loaded it up with the gang members, and I didn't go, but they landed on the beach in Crystal Beach, which is kind of a recreational. It used to be an amusement park, one of the best as a child, and they fought Beta of Canada under the Ferris wheel. It was like 50 arrests and 20 hospitalizations, and it was just a very violent period. And for years, I thought, why is it so violent? And then when I moved back to Canada after my third year at university, I realized because America's always at war. So it made sense that our youth would be at war. You've always heard of gangs in the States and stuff. And in Canada, they don't really do that. They support people in World War II, and even well, a lot of our own men went and supported Vietnam for
Mm,
a lot of our people joined the American Army during that period. But I was really fortunate because I was the only native in the classroom, grammar school. And it was got a lot more diverse when I went to high school, which was just up the street. But that's exactly when they started busing the black community from the east side to the
mm,
west side. And I wasn't black and I wasn't white. So I was like a mediator between the black and the white community. And it really, even though I was in basically a white gang, there were native members and other gangs in the city at the time, and we became like band members later in life on the res, and really got my music career starting from working with native players on my own res. But that really, opened my eyes. Being the kind of ambassador between black and white anger at each other. for whatever reason. Those kind of stresses played into our adult life in here in the States. But it was a curious position, and there was still a lot of violence, and of course, my gang got. We always thought of ourselves as lovers rather than fighters, and of course, I was the biggest one, the biggest, strongest guy. Was really good at sports. I mean, I used to drag six guys on my back playing tackle football in the yard and all. But I eventually turned to the arts to get out of football. I knew it was a dead end unless you hurt someone. At my size, you had to hurt people
Yeah.
to get like. I did have an offer to Bucknell for football scholarship, but I chose a different route. But
Wow.
it's nice to see a lot of our tribal members in both states and Canada turning to basketball. It's a much more kind of a I don't know. I just love basketball, and it's great to see that young. I'm a bit of an NBA fan, WNBA fan, and
Okay.
I think it's Lindy. You should get him on the show, Lindy. Oh, I
Indeed.
can't think of his last name now. Lindy Waters, the third, I think. He's on the
Okay.
Oklahoma City Thunder, and he was a big hit in the development league this year, but he doesn't get to play much but garbage time now. But
Hmm.
I'm just so proud to see one of I'm not sure what tribe he is out of Oklahoma, but it's just nice to see our people
Yeah.
infiltrating those professional leagues at that almost acrobatic sport. It's just anyway, I really enjoy, it's one of my pastimes watching the playoffs and stuff. But I've always been and I grew up in the grammar school lots, basically playing basketball from sun up to sundown.
Oh yeah.
It was just that sport I took to. Yeah.
It's such a majestic sport as opposed to I was continuously being recruited for football in high school, and I don't want to hurt anybody.
Exactly. You
I'm
gotta
all
want
right.
to
I'm good.
kind of want to kill. You gotta
Yeah.
kill. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
just
wasn't in me to do that, but
yeah. And
but
you
that
said
that native social community in Buffalo growing up,
yeah.
and that fight we used to cross, we still do. It's called the border crossing celebration. We cross from Niagara Falls, Ontario, to Niagara Falls, New York, one year, and then we reverse and go from Niagara Falls, New York, to Niagara Falls, Ontario, every third weekend in July, celebrating those Jay Treaty rights. And so that's what I meant about the political side of being
Yeah.
Native. I really grew up fighting for our rights, our ability to bring, everything we needed to sustain. And they stopped us at one time because one of our people from Tuscarora, which is just near Niagara Falls, was trying to bring some of their wonderful corn seed. Their corn is like that big, that's just
Oh my God.
when they stopped them from bringing the seed, and that's what really broke open this need to have this celebration every year to remind both Canada and the United States. But Canada doesn't respect that treaty; it's not their treaty. So Native people going into Canada don't have as much advantage as I do coming stateside. So
Yeah.
that's been a sore point for a lot of American actors trying to work in Canada from time to time. But anyway.
Oh yeah. It's yeah, it's almost impossible unless you
Yeah.
get lucky.
If you're native and they know you want to get in Canada, they may not even let you in.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
they gave Leonard back without just cause, and then he ends up in prison for 50 years. But
Yeah.
Leonard Peltier, yeah.
See, that's just hearing about, your early years and everything you did up into your 20s. I mean, that's more of a story in and of itself than anything. But then you go on and you have this grand career, not only as like an actor, but as musician. And for the acting side of it, I mean, coming from somebody who was in, a white gang and you're being, the mediator in between these two, like or
Yeah.
two, but couple of different clashing cultures. I mean, what did you find from acting that you felt was, a way to I don't know, not necessarily give a different purpose, but find a whole new meaning? Like, what was it about acting that stood out to you that made you want to pursue it?
Well, you know, in my culture, and in most of our cultures, for instance, just the diet. You know, grown up with that fast food diet. I grew up in the 50s where Wonder Bread was supposed to supply all the nutrients you needed. And now my community is suffering 56% incidence of diabetic condition in my, we got about 22,000 people in my community. So it's major health concern, and I suffered it myself, and I'm trying to recover at my tender age. But just that alone has been amazing. Uh, the political structure in Canada is a lot different, although they're the biggest exploiters, minerals, you name it, uranium, plutonium. I mean, I remember this Ontario place. It's a kind of a fancy place where you go in the summertime and they show movies on the big screens, and they have different, very scientific kind of things for you to explore. And they have concerts, and I remember they employed me to go find a nice native story from the north and bring it back, and we're going to make the holograms, and we'll tell this beautiful story. Well, lo and behold, I took that journey, and that was one of my first experiences is Canada is going north.
Mm,
Uh, and I took that journey, and I think I visited 36 communities. There's within the northern, not one of them didn't have some environmental disaster.
mm,
Even Grassy Narrows, still in Western Ontario, have been suffering from what's that, Minamata disease from hydroelectric projects, and there's a pulp and paper mill every 50 miles, and that's given 50% more incidence of cancer in our women up there in the north. Uh, so there was one not community not suffering from some exploitation, whether it be plutonium, uranium, where they just radiated the whole river going through a native community. And it just blew me away. And I remember chasing down that time the Minister of the Environment. And that's when I learned the Minister of Environment, probably in both countries, is there to moderate the industry and the exploitation. They're not there to protect the environment. They're just there to exploit it. And that exploitation has gone on since I've long since left. But and those communities aren't any better, and you can see those water boil issues. There's actually a feature film that I help operate the Santa Fe International Film Festival, and Boil Alert was the title. Everyone should see it, the Native communities, but nothing's really changed. And I was doing that in the 20s, in my 20s. So I'm 71 now, and that's it's the same argument. So, and then the oil boom, the tar sands. A lot of our
mm,
communities got bought out by early on, where they were, especially Alberta. All those communities got wire to wire money, and it increased the drug addiction issues, and we're still facing those issues like bad. The pharmaceutical industry has been the worst thing in our life, and especially for us. And a lot of our people are sustaining from that industry, and it's somehow being kept care of still with our medical program in Canada to take care of the Indian people medically. But it's all this pharmaceutical industry, which the country is so heavily invested in. It's really killing us, and it
yeah.
doesn't prevent or heal. It just is a prevention, so you can continue to eat the soda pop and all the bad food that we ingest as Native people day to day, and it's really killing us. And so I was very active. Not only did I act after discovered a lot of this information. The first thing I did after some success as an actor, I had a series. I think it was called Forever Night. It was
Mm, yeah.
cops chasing. Well, in fact, one of my cops was I was Captain Stone Tree. One of my cops was a vampire, could only work nights, and gave me some success. And I invested in developing a magazine because I thought they're stealing our stories, not on this particular show, but all of Canadian television just took our stories and made profits as the story writer and eventually the screenwriter. They'd get maybe 10% of the budget of a particular project. And our people whose stories those weren't getting anything. And so I started this magazine trying to take back our ownership of our stories. And it was basically an arts magazine, but eventually had a little news section because, casinos were just booming then and people were giving up their hunting and fishing rights for a casino license and giving up different things for casino license. And of course, gambling, another addictive thing that our second coming, he was named Hampson Lake, was one of the things he said that we shouldn't do is gamble and beat our wives and drink alcohol and one thing he didn't talk about was tobacco. So my people exploit tobacco to sustain big time. Like we got a factory that employs 350 of our own people, and all the farmers are growing, they're not growing white corn anymore, they're growing tobacco, because it's such a, and I'd say maybe 50 to 60% of my community survives from tobacco sales to locals who come to the res to buy supposedly cheaper gas and
Yeah.
cheaper tobacco products. And we sell to the French army and the Italian army and the German army. And we sell around the world now. And it's created this amazing economy. Like we got like castles on the res. Now you'll see a little impoverished Indian house, and then you'll see this like monstrosity
Oh, no.
castle, mainly developed from tobacco always. And of course, in the early days, they were, using that border. There was thoughts that the guys who did the 9/11 deed actually came through, some of our like. There's one community called Akwesasne Mohawk community,
Mm.
which is in Ontario, Quebec, and the U.S. And that's always been a sore spot for immigration. And we used to move people, move alcohol, move cigarettes, move drugs. It got pretty intense back in the 90s. Actually created a war in that community, and there were some deaths from that. But
Wow.
so we've always been at the whim, I guess, of the major country powers trying to sustain some kind of living. The salmon industry was developed in the east for the Mi'kmaq and the Algonquian up there, and then they took that away from them. Same on the west coast of BC. So anytime we would find an economy to kind of help sustain us when there was nothing else,
Yeah.
of course, a lot of my people were iron workers and worked building. We basically built New York City. We built the power project, which supplied hydroelectric power to the world for the first time. And so we were kind of worker bees for that industrial period. And trying to, and eventually all that dried up. It changed. The industry changed. It's all concrete and different things. So it really sent a lot of our people back to be artists in my
Mm.
community, and a lot of that work that was there to sustain. And so the tobacco industry just took off in my community. In the gas business, we actually make gas now.
Oh,
People,
no.
and one of the biggest industry in my community is the racing stock car, many,
Yeah.
stocks, thunder stocks, and then they got into those ones with the wigs. Like they draw like 8 to 10,000 people on Friday nights in the summer and we got like all these families that are like racing against each other. And not only are they successful in our community, but they go around the nation racing these cars, and it's become, making the fastest car. Like there's almost factories for making these cars now. So it's really interesting, fascinating when you look at my community as a whole and how they've had to sustain and where they're going. Like here we are, trying to fight, climate change. And we're burning out. Yeah, I don't think we use gas. It's almost like rocket fuel to run these machines, and it's just like a major industry now, and
Yeah.
it's really, it's a great story. We got millionaires. We've had a billionaire even, and it's been interesting. My sister went with the main billionaire. He just passed away a couple of years ago,
Oh,
tragically.
man.
But just having that, rich and poor in our own community is real. And of course, none of that, uh, you know, voids the traditionalism. So as long as you're not, drinking too much and gambling, and so there's not a casino to be found in my community. The province got into gaming near us, but for the most part, it's kind of where in America that's totally the opposite. Where casino gambling supports maybe 20% of our people, and get direct money back to sustain, and that's created a lot of confusion
Yeah.
and infighting and stuff as well. Casino families. I remember they used to have this celebration in Los Angeles where they would be, it was called the American Indian Registry. So they were trying to denote who's Indian and who's not, and who should be hired as film and television actors. And he did some training. I used to teach scene study classes for them, but they
Yeah.
had the annual awards show, and the only way they could sustain it was from all the California casinos. So you'd go there as the poor actor to the big ball, and you just look because all the casino families would buy all the tables. And so you try to buddy up with a casino family so you could actually afford to go see the show to win your award if you were so lucky. But that whole thing has just been kind of wild, and a lot of the actors that haven't been able to sustain that
Mm.
dry period, and that's part of the arts. You have to really diversify in order to sustain. And if they couldn't, they often would marry into the casino
Yeah.
tribe so they could live and still pursue their interest in acting. But yeah, it's been a kind of a wild career that way to watch all that. And that's one thing the theater taught me is, it litericized me, working with all that 10 years of theater history, both Canadian theater and,
Mm.
of course, the impact of British theater in Canada is profound, as it is in the States. And it really nurtured the American playwright. And it's been fascinating to be a part of that, in the early part of that. And it really litericized me because I wasn't people say, why don't you read? And back in my day, there was nothing to read that had any reference to me. It was,
Yeah.
the novel writing and the nonfiction didn't really start in our community to maybe 30 years ago. And so I said, "Well, we don't publish our own people, so why should I read all this? I've learned this in a way." But so it didn't lead me to be a big reader. So
Yeah.
the acting and all these wonderful stories that come through screenplays and novels and stuff. And I read a lot of novels now. I'm just about to read Prison Writings from Leonard Peltier, which is about a 250-page book. So I do a lot of Indian literature read aloud for books on tape and stuff, and that's been great for me. I just love that.
Have you thought about writing yourself? Have you dived into
Oh yeah,
that?
publishers are after me to write my story because it's so fascinating. So when I did start this magazine, really what I was trying to do was launch a radio system in Canada. And I started going after licensing in the major urban centers. And I actually had like Montreal, the nation's capital, Ottawa. I got Vancouver. I got Toronto. I got Alberta, Calgary. I got Halifax. I had 70% of the Canadian population. And that's really, I thought radio's, the sound of my voice, you're creating the imagery in your own mind, where television puts your mind into beta, which is
Mhm.
basically, if you think about it, television replaced the church. They didn't need the
Yeah.
church anymore. All
Yeah.
they needed was television because they weren't necessarily interested in your soul anymore. They were more interested in whatever mineral rights you may have in your community, whether it be trees or all the above chemicals. Now it's chromite. They're going to dig up northern Ontario for chromite, which makes aluminum steel, like the bombs and the planes, and of course the new economies of Argentina and India and China. They all want stainless steel sinks. They want everything we got. And they're just going to unearth Northern Ontario, which has been pristine. And that's one of my first theatrical gigs was going up. And then when I went up there in the 70s, I saw television come in and consumerize Northern Ontario among the Native people within 6 weeks. The kids from Sandy Lake, Ontario, which is as far up as you can go almost, he started coming down to Sioux Lookout and fly in to get the McDonald's, to get the Nike sneakers. And Canada said, "Oh, we're going to give you this television and radio so you can kind of keep your language and culture intact." But all they wanted to do was consumerize the North so they could go in there with the fancy geologist and
Mm.
just eat up all the rights they could. So it's just been like seething, snake-like,
Yeah.
uh, to watch this go down in my life and career. So my concept was, okay, let's radioize the urban centers because the urban Indians know how to deal with AIDS. They know how to deal
Mm.
with COVID. They know how to deal with certain things that we're facing. But the traditions in those small Sandy Lake, Ontario communities, they hold the language, they hold the cultural integrity. And I thought if I can get, because there was 300 community-based stations up in the north because of this Hummelin line, they cut the country north from south. And I was trying to urbanize all the urban Indians, and I got really close. But because all of our political will in our Indian community was already bought out by oil, was already bought out by the forest industry, in a way they were sustaining from whatever. Yet it was, like I said, the incidence of cancer among us from these industries are killing us. But
Yeah.
that's how they sustained economically. There was very little food when you think the farther north you go, the less fresh food. So it just had such an impact. But to see us just get used like that, it made me want to just unify the North and the South and to have that translation between urban and rural. And, I was hopeful to spread it into the States as well because radio, is very seldomly used. In fact, when you look at our communities as a whole, we really don't have any free press. Most of the community-based stations in native communities in the US are owned and operated by the tribe, and they control the narrative where you can't speak out against whatever the tribe's doing to create some economy. If it's exploitation of coal and flushing it to Los Angeles, we got no voice. We can't really talk about it. And I just felt bad that if we had the knowledge, just through the sound of our voices telling these stories and helping us protect our little community amongst this exploitive world in North America, we could have an impact not only on us, but those signals bleed, especially when you get to those urban regions. I had 70% of the Canadian population by radio. And I actually fought in the CRTC, which is like the FCC, to get when a commercial station wants to renew its license in Canada every 7-8 years, they have to put 4% of their annual budget to public good. And I
Mm.
knew Canada didn't know its indigenous people. So I got indigenous radio to get portions of that 4%. And that's how we underwrote our efforts to win this radio. But when I needed $55 million to radioize Indigenous Canada, the government wouldn't give it to me. And the political will in our own community worked against me. They didn't want an artist run network. They wanted, the story to hold true so they can make their money, as they saw fit. And that's what they saw as progress, the exploitation. And I'm sure they're looking back now and seeing how naivety really
Mm,
played a role in that thinking when so many of our people are suffering in northern Canada and and southern Canada. But it was an interesting project, and then that led because I had all that experience. The North was televised, but the South had nothing because they thought the Southern Indians would just assimilate into Canadian culture and they could wipe those reses off. But we fought that tooth and nail over the centuries, and we did launch the Aboriginal People's Television Network, and I tried to have the radio be a part of that and create like almost like a CBC where we or NPR, where well, NPR doesn't. Well, I guess they do some television, but where we do creative television and narrative television, and children's shows, and that's what they do now. It's quite phenomenal. At the time when we won that license, I think it was around 2000, and I was a big part of that whole movement. So I really socialized myself about the communications and the right to the airwaves, and I can see some tribes starting to pick up on that now, like Navajo nations fighting. Who's flying, especially with all this new technology of those little things floating in the sky.
yeah.
All that new stuff. So anyway, it was all part and rolled into my career at the same time, but it was huge movement, and I spent 10 years of my life doing all that as diligently as I could, and I had a lot of support. I used to have to sell the magazine ads. I would do it in 3 days, and I was touring to the States too, and I distributed the magazine stateside. It was a fascinating time, but it took a lot out of me. It really did. And it broke my heart in the end when my own communities wouldn't support this radio effort when we were so close. I mean, like they spent 55 million just looking at our communities, and there's 600 of them, to tell us that why we're messed up, but they wouldn't give me 55 million. And CBC could have done this years ago. They could have radioized Native Canada years ago, but they chose not to.
Yeah.
And it just goes you to see how much they don't really want us to have any vision. And I thought our way of looking at the world could have a positive impact on the overall environmental movement. And that's what I thought. It was like a thinking invasion within. We would invade Canada from within with knowledge because that residential school system, as it moved east, and it started in my communities, basically, it was our reservation where they started in this town called Brantford, was the first residential school. And, we've had maybe hundreds of burials unearthed and found, suspicion, and they were actually incinerating potentially children in our community after they died. And as that residential school system went farther west, it just got sicker and sicker and sicker. And then they used the same system for the homelands. I mean,
Yeah.
we taught South Africans how to create homelands through the residential, and they did the same thing to the Black community in both, not so much in Canada, but certainly in the United States, to make us worker bees, train us to be worker bees for the industrial nation. So that whole industrial period is a really dark part of American history, I think.
Yeah. Oh, and building off of that, because I've, having spoken to many indigenous figures, activists, actors, artists, everybody across the board, I want to see if there's anything, whether it's an organization or maybe just a name that comes to mind that I could put in the show notes that you would highly recommend for our listeners to show that support to, like, to keep continuing this progress that's been great, but it's slowly making its way, as far as like just educating the rest of the world as far as what's going on. If there is an organization you really care about, or something we can kind of
No,
steer their
I
way.
seem to have disagreements with them all. They've chosen a different route.
Yeah.
My thinking is, okay, we need our own television network in the United States for Indigenous. We should have our own television. And we've created the economy to make that happen with 250 casino tribes or operating casinos.
Yeah.
And we had that economy where we could have done that. And the signal for APTN, if they flip the switch, goes all the way down to Ecuador. So we could have unified with television years ago because I put it in the business plan for APTN to roll out because there's not enough money, there's not enough people in Canada to make creative television for 25 million people. That's probably up to 30 now.
Mm.
But we needed that American economy to build that network all the way down to Ecuador, which, the condor meets the eagle, those relationship between North American Indians and South American Indians pre-contact was vital and just so enriching for our people in those days. That's how they sustained was
Yeah.
that trade routes that went down there. And then when the eagle did fly and meet the condor, that knowledge, all of that knowledge from the Inca and the Aztecs and the Maya, even corn, for instance, which was developed by the Maya from a grass. It was the first time a human interaction between plant and humans created this food that allowed, Europe to enslave Africa. All they had was oats and barley. You plant one, you get 6 or 8. You plant one seed of corn, you might get 270 seeds. It changed the whole economy of the world. And that's classically an Indian plant. And so when you think of it, they enslaved Africa with an Indian plant. And it allowed them to feed those ships to go make that long journey across the ocean. And it moved into China fast, So, there's so much knowledge to be shared about those early times pre-contact because peace was widespread among our tribe. My own people formed a peace, the tree of peace back in the 11th century. Since the 11th century, we've had peace on this continent. And yet the history books say, oh, we were all at war. But you think of all those confederacies,
Hmm.
whether it be the Blackfoot Confederacy or the Nishnabes and the Adawas and all those relationships that were formed. Our whole story has never been told. And even that relationship when the blacks were brought in, and we were there, the Tuscaroras, all those tribes in the South were there. The Cherokees, all those Oklahoma tribes were there when met those black people. And that relationship between Black America and Indian America, that story's never been told, really. It's been written about some from a few authors, but that story and those relationships, because the trail the Tuscaroras took to the Six Nations to make us Six Nations in 1712, after being warred bound by Washington for 12 years, that trail they took, the Tuscarora Trail, they call it, to the basically up to Syracuse, New York. We used to just have one fire before the American made itself a country, and Canada took that War of 1812, decided where that line was.
Yeah.
That Tuscarora Trail was the Underground Railroad for freedom for a lot of black slaves in those days. So, I mean, I look forward to that history being exploited and retold,
Yeah.
to American, so they can really see. And then you look at the politics today. Oh my God, they can't even talk that the Civil War was based on racism. They can't even like say that, like
Yeah.
it,
Oh, it's
it,
insane.
it, so it just turns my stomach. I know I'm in my senior years, but I'm looking forward to moving on when it's my time. But and then you look at the American political system today. It's just a farce. It's a farce, and I can't believe people are fighting for this guy. It just makes no sense to me. It drives me crazy. I gotta not pay attention, and I'm
Yeah.
not an American, so I can't vote anyway. So I'm happy about that. We weren't meant to vote. We were supposed to just live by
Mhm.
our hereditary system. The mothers decided, the clan mothers, and they took our concepts of our system the Iroquois Confederacy, and they made their constitution. But one of the main things they chose to differ in was this electoral college, because the clan mothers selected leadership, and they turned that into some corrupt thing,
Yeah.
right?
Oh
Imagine if
yeah.
the women, in the end, selected the leader in this country. We've been living under this paternalized bullshit
Yeah.
for since then. Those guys knew it. Those guys knew women selected leadership in my community. Benjamin Franklin and all those characters chose to cut the women out from the start of this country. And I have no idea why the women don't rise up. The non-native, non-black women, all them white
Yeah.
women that control their husbands and this pathetic life we live here, why they don't stand up? Why they don't stand up again, like they did in the 20s, and take back those rights? They should be selecting the leader, not these goofy electoral college or this whatever misguided voting system. It just seems corrupt one way or the other. Anyway, I just ranted on for you.
No, no, I love excite. I've learned so much in 45 minutes. Some things that I had heard of and I'd studied before, but also things that I will continue to expand upon, especially when you brought up, exposing the true native history. And I'm not going to take too much more of your time, but I, I'm just completely flabbergasted that this was as, I whenever I do these interviews, it's a fun conversation. It's all about, entertainment and the business, but I do love these true, just natural educational conversations, especially with everything you've been through, everything you've experienced, everything you've studied, and everything you've worked for. That was more of a gift to me than anything by having you on the show, is just hearing from your perspective all these different things and things that I was taking notes this entire time of, these various books I need to go find. I need to search out this history. And I definitely, I hope I can get you back on the show at some point in the future, since we are coming up on time. But the one last thing I want to ask you is if you have a piece of advice that you could pass along to any artist listening to this podcast, to, sort of keep them going in these, like you mentioned, insane times we have, especially in the States currently.
Well, the arts can change the world. The reason I became an actor, I learned young that if you can make people laugh or cry, you make them think. And that's what we need, is thinking humans, people that can process and look at a situation and realize where the truth lies and where the future of, because we don't have an end to our story. We don't have the Bible, where it ends. Our languages are the true study of nature based on observation over centuries of time. All the answers to sustain on this planet are there in your languages. And if you want to be an actor, you want to be a writer, you want to be a TV director, come in with your language, because that's what's going to carry you along. And I so appreciate the short amount of time I was able to study my own language. But now, in our ceremonial life, they only conduct our ceremonies in our own language. So you have to have some knowledge to get all the blessing, all the understanding of how the world really works from an indigenous perspective. And it's, but the other thing is, you got to learn how to come in, and you got to learn how to give when you're a performer or an artist. It's got to come through the work, and it's got to move people. And sometimes you have to dig in and pull your heart out and expose it, and they're going to laugh and cry and poke at it, and then you got to know how to put it back in and heal. So I see so many young actors who are being granted all these, and a lot of them do know their languages, but a lot are coming in just because they're the right look.
Mm.
And there's so much work to be done to develop those skills as a long-time performer. And sometimes it's a hard road, economically. You got to have support. whether it comes from your family or your community, because it's hard. It's hard to secure the work and maintain a career. But I think the best way to start in the arts business, in particular acting, of course, is like I started from the ground up with theater, telling your own personal stories in your own community. Find a little part of that history of some elder that can open up and make that a theatrical presentation to help your community understand the past and understand the language and understand your ceremonial way of life, because I see theater actors is because a lot of our ceremonies were doused, wiped out when you got relocated. That ceremonial thing was the first thing to leave because it was all based on location and maintaining so that you could grow food. I mean, it really was to protect you from the inclement weather and to
Yeah.
hope to have a good growing season so you could feed the people. And if you don't understand that and you just go into it blindly, if you don't know how to take care of your heart health and you end up using drugs, you end up using alcohol to kind of calm down. And it's a classic thing where alcoholism and all that has played a role into an artist's life because they keep giving and maybe they don't know how to come back to being, you know, real and safe and humble, and so that you can take care of the children when you go home. So it's not easy being out in public life. There's a lot at stake. You take a lot of pokes. You take criticism as a way of life, and it's really hard on the soul if you don't know how to take care of that. So, I just urge you to take care of yourself, come in humbly, learn that language when you're young because it's easy then.
Yeah.
It's much harder as an adult to reconnect with your community and find that where the cultural integrity lies within your community and help it prosper, help those ceremonies stay alive. All those traditional means and ways we've sustained ourselves for centuries. So, yeah, I guess that's the That's the advice I got today.
I no, I appreciate it. I think this was one of the most illuminating interviews I've done on this show, and I just want to say thank you again for hopping on to this. The only other thing I'll say is, hopefully one of these days I catch you on a production and we can resume this conversation.
That'd be excellent. Yeah, I look forward to that time.
Perfect. I do as well. Until then, I'm gonna let you go, let you get better, and get over the cold. And I hope you have a wonderful week. This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Oh.